Welcome back, everybody, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have a very special guest, a guy who I admire very much, and this is actually our second member of the Brooklyn Combine that has been on one of our episodes, the first one being Ken Montgomery. Today we have an attorney from Brooklyn and co-founder of the Brooklyn Combine, Keith White. Keith, welcome.
Hey. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Good to see you, Dwight.
It's an honor, man. It's an honor. Thank you. Likewise. So, you coming on is timely, and it's no mistake why we're trying to have you on this week, because you just spent some time in Texas, in Del Rio, with the, I'll just say, complete and utter humanitarian failure on behalf of the United States and, our broader kind of global political economy, seeing what's happened with Haitian migration into the United States. So, look, the forum is open here. I'm super interested, and everybody that's listening is super interested in understanding what you saw and your feedback on it. So please tell us what you saw there.
All right. So, and so first, I saw the pictures like everyone else of the cowboys on the horses with the whips. Chasing after the Haitian migrants. And so I got a call from Council Member Farrah Lewis from Brooklyn, who said, listen, this is happening to my people. She's Haitian. This is happening to my people. I'm reaching out to people in my community. I need help. So I said, all right, let me reach out to a few NGO leaders that I'm familiar with and see what we can do to get resources down. And so I reached out to a few folks, and Reverend Bernard from Christian Cultural Center was like, what do you need? Let's send a team down. Let's get on the ground, and let's see what organizations are actually doing the work, and let's figure out how to support. But let's also see if we can get down there to get eyes and really fact check some of the headlines. So we got with, it was Councilmember Lewis, Councilmember-elect Rita Joseph, Rita Pierre, who's an attorney as well, Sam Juvel, who is a nonprofit NGO in Haiti, and so he does a lot of work providing resources in Haiti, and another brother named George. So and my nephew Alfonso. So we all flew down to get a tour of the containment site where Haitian migrants were being held. And so when we got there, you had to be pre-approved to do this tour. So you had to be approved by ICE and by Department of Homeland Security, even to see and interact with people at the border trying to get into the country, which was, its own. Right.
That to me seems like right off the bat, it's like, you're already screwed, because I was just thinking about this as you were saying that, and I was writing it down, which is like, you're gathering NGOs to fight an American man-made problem, like an American government man-made problem. But okay, that's insane. Please continue.
So we get to the containment site, and we see the encampment. We see like there are wooden. So the people have made they've made these wooden homes from sticks and stuff and rubble from trees and stuff like that. They've made homes in these encampment sites, and at this time it's about 3,000 people, and they're like right on top of each other. So immediately we start asking, well, are you guys administering COVID tests? Well, no. We're like, okay, so whose responsibility is it? And this is a Border Patrol agent, a U.S. federal government worker said it's not our responsibility. So we said, well, if you're holding them here and you're holding them in these quarters, why wouldn't it be your responsibility? They said, well, it's NGO's responsibility to provide COVID exams. So we said, but here's the kicker. The NGOs weren't allowed inside the encampment site. So we're like, well, how can they provide COVID tests if they're not allowed inside? So then the question was, well, do you have Creole interpreters, who can like bridge the language gap to make sure that you're getting the information you need. They're getting the information. They're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Because what happens is when you get to the border, you're either, as a migrant, you're either expelled, deported, or you have an anklet put on you, which tracks you throughout the country, right? And then you have a
Jesus.
notice to appear, and that's that, right? And so we're like, well, what's, like, how do you, what's the process for determining who does what? And they're like, well, they're interviewed by Border Patrol agents. And I'm like, yeah, but what's
In
the
what
protocol?
language?
Is there a checklist? And they're like, so it's basically random. So I said, well, the problem there is if it's random, there's no process. And if there's no process, there's no accountability. People can simply just be deporting people and expelling people. And, the difference between expelling and deporting is key. Expelling is when you just simply say, no, you can't come in, and you send them back across the border. Deport is when you send them back to the country of origin.
Right.
So in many cases, these people have been they've been traversing for months to years, going from Haiti to Chile to the U.S., or Haiti to Brazil to the U.S., or Haiti to Panama to the U.S. Because there was no direct way to get through. And so when they take those treks, which is from 6 months to 6 years, right, to be deported back to Haiti, and you haven't been there in 6 years, is its own trauma. The other problem is when we were at the border and they told us that these interviews and these conversations were being held with Creole interpreters, we saw, we were 7 feet away from the people. We saw the ICE agents and the Border Patrol agents speaking to them in Spanish.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No.
Oh my God.
So we were like, wait, you said they speak Creole. They're speaking Spanish to Creole speaking people.
Oh my God.
And so it was a complete mess. And so there were a lot. So we asked, we were asking, these were the questions we were asking though. How do you consider it humane? The trek between Mexico and that border is like 30 miles, right? So these people have been walking with children, pregnant women, old people, young people, 30 miles. It's 100 degrees during the day and it's 40 degrees at night. And
Jesus.
And they're traversing through, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term coyote. So coyotes, the coyotes are these people who are in these spaces taking advantage of these migrants. And so they're sexually assaulting them, raping them, robbing them, stealing from them, killing them with no accountability. And so this is the terrain that these people are traversing through to get to the land of the free, right? The home of the brave, the people who are afraid of them. So it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. And then the idea, having a conversation with a Border Patrol agent is like speaking to a mummy. There's no response. They're simply just doing what they're told. And I'm saying to them, what do you think gives you the moral or social hierarchy to determine who can come into this land, this massive land that you don't have a rightful heir or claim to? And there's no response. This is my country, and I'm here to defend my country. Is your country a physical place, or is your country, so the conversation is really, I'm sorry, I'm talking your head off, but the conversation is really, the conversation is really non-existent there, and things aren't making sense. It's tough.
I think about this a lot, which is like what you said there with land of the free, home of the brave, which is obviously just at this point, a complete cliche and basically means nothing. And like everything else, it's been commercialized and marketed and stamped on lunchboxes and stuff. And it's a completely meaningless platitude, made completely meaningless specifically because those principles don't exist in practice.
Right.
And there's something I think about a lot, which is like this, and I've never had a good time of articulating it, but it's like this idea of like opposites, meaning like the most oppressed people typically are the most resilient, and the people that are the most comfortable, purport themselves to be the toughest and stuff like that, the kind of suburban cowboy sort of thing. And so when you say like a land of the free, home of the brave, like if these people are which we'll get into a second, because I mean the American meddling in the country of Haiti is like the hypocrisy is dripping all over the place. It's hard to even overstate.
So that's the other problem, right? Is the idea that American foreign policy is what informed France's ability to usurp resources from Haiti and enforce debts that were not rightful, not lawful, and not appropriate. And then as France dealt with the fallout from World War II, who did they build? They built Haiti. And
Yes.
so the Haitian economy, there's a couple of things. The Haitian people are the first in the diaspora to fight for and successfully gain their freedom. But also the Haitian people and the Haitian economy is what helped support France and helped support America at times as well. And so the idea that the sons and daughters, the children of Haitian heroes in my eyes are not allowed here is evil.
Yes, it's evil.
Yeah,
it's evil. I have to talk a little bit about the our current administration and how they deal with this. I mean, I should mention, and I only saw this recently. I hadn't heard about this before, but it seems that Joe Biden has like a kind of long-standing history of feelings about Haiti. And I watched this stunning 1994 interview, and I'm not paraphrasing. I'm reading this directly, where he says, if Haiti just quietly sank into the Caribbean, and then he says, it wouldn't mean all that much difference to American interests, which is an insane thing to say as like, a senior senator.
That's an insane thing for a human being to say. Right? Like if you are a human being and you have a sense of humanity in you, humanity meaning empathy and compassion for other living beings, right? If you have that, then the idea that a whole country sinking into the abyss is an atrocity. To say that it wouldn't mean nothing, and I think, and I don't want to like spend too much time bashing Biden as much as I feel like we need to bash the concept of the American presidency, right? And every face that's filled that void or occupied that space has simply done the same thing. Whether they had an evil face like Trump or whether they had a friendly face like Obama, they've all done the same thing. And yes. I mean, you can tell because any platitude, anything that seems great becomes basically invisible by the person that comes after them. Even the idea, the concept that Obama was the black president, the first black president, that whole legacy seems invisible at this point. And it seems like, oh yeah, that's right, we did have a black president. What did that mean? And so when I think about Biden, I'm like, I have the same feelings for Biden as I had for Trump, as I had for Obama, as I had for Bush. Clearly,
I think a lot about like political motivation and gaining a critical mass to upend like like you're talking about, like a systemic issue. This is longitudinal. This lasts beyond individual presidents. And it is, comes down to a presidency. And I think a lot about MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail, in which he just talks about frustration from the white moderate, as he puts it, which I think at this point we could just say like, centerline Democrats or like, our general kind of moderate liberal or something, I think would probably fit that mold as we use that sort of nomenclature now. And I think that person, that kind of like general blue voter thought that, hey, now that the good guy's in charge, it's going to change and we don't have to think about this as much because Trump was bad. He was the bad guy and he did the bad things because he's a bad, vulgar man. And I started to sniff the things was going to be, as bad, especially when Vice President Kamala Harris said, don't come.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back.
So that was specifically in Guatemala, or to the Guatemalan president or something like that. It was a crazy thing to watch her say in front of somebody like that.
So the wave of that's another thing. So the wave of Haitian migrants has kind of shifted now, and so there's a wave of Colombian and Guatemalan migrants that are going to be approaching that same border. But I do want to say this though before I even talk about Kamala. When we went, so with that day where we were given the tour and we were asking questions and we were there, we left that evening and we had planned to come back the next day. When we planned to go back the next day, by 8 a.m. the next day, they had completely bulldozed the site. It was completely gone. So when we asked, well, what happened to all of the migrants? They told us, oh, they all went back. They all just went back. This is what Border Patrol agents told us. They all went back across the border, meaning they went back through Mexico. I asked that there were some Reuters reporters there from the AP and from Reuters. And we asked them what happened. And they said, no, they bust them all. 2,000 people got deported back to Haiti. And another 500 people were sent to Houston to be dispersed through processing centers to be deported. And then 500 people were being released to various points in the U.S. with ankle bracelets on. And they were left to fend for themselves to get tickets places. And so that's what happened. So one of the things that's interesting
to the listener, I'm just like dying and my head shaking my head. But please, sorry, go ahead.
So when you mentioned Kamala giving that directive, like don't come, that's the greatest disappointment that I'm having with Black people at this time. Right, is the idea that we're so focused and intent on being accepted in whiteness, but also in being comfortable in whiteness, that if someone else is coming to disrupt our comfort, if someone else is coming and it looks like they're going to, do something with our comfortability and the system of whiteness in America, then we have a problem with them. And I say that because Kamala's directive not to come, that's a script.
Yes.
And
yes,
it's a script that Black people have been saying to one another. And I say that because there was a political, I'll say he's a political leader from Miami, Florida, a Haitian man, and he's a high-ranking Haitian elected official, and he has a direct line to the White House. And he was actually the person who got us approved to get into the containment center.
Wow.
But he was the only person who was allowed to speak to the Haitian migrant. None of us were allowed to speak to them. We couldn't even get closer than 5 feet. So
was there any justification for that, or it was just like, hey, this is just how it is?
The justification is going to make you angry. So I'm just warning you.
You're in the right place.
Trigger warning. So what they said is, when I said, so there was a woman who was saying, hey, my husband and my son were taken to a hospital. They're going to be processed from the hospital. I don't know where they're going to go. We don't have cell phones. I don't know where they're going to go. And I don't know if I'm going to be deported. So I need help. I need to figure out what's going on. And so I asked the ICE agent and the Border Patrol agent to say, listen, can I go talk to her? He says, no, you cannot talk to them. I said, can I go listen to her? He said, no, because then they're going to start clamoring so that you can listen to them. And I was like, do you realize that you saying that it's a problem for humans to listen to other humans is insane? And so he said, you guys are not authorized to speak to them at all. But this one appointed guy, this high-ranking elected official was, and what he was allowed to go speak to them, and he went to go speak to them. And what he said to them was, why did you guys come here? You guys should not have come here. We're working hard to make sure that you guys are taken care of and this is your fault. We should not. This is a black guy saying it. And so the people that I was with, the group that I came with, we were so disgusted with him.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Right. That we literally just walked out and said, we're not associated with him at all. But that's what moderate politics is. That's the line, and that's the script. And so when you ask me about, like, if we talk about Kamala, I'm like, come on, like, I'm not here for performative politics. I don't care if she's the first whatever, right? She's the continuing, of a bunch of other things, just like Biden is. So
I really, that story really hits me. And we've talked about this on the program a little bit before about family separation. And, you're a family man. And I think about being separated from your child or your spouse or your family members. And I don't think that there's probably any horror that can top that, and not knowing in any which way that if you're even going to be in the same country as them at the end of the day, that's really upsetting.
Yeah.
And moreover, and I'm just thinking about this now, I mean, there's no way that there's any like cogent policy that's processing these people properly to give them, like, the idea in general is not to allow them to immigrate into the United States.
I don't want to go. I don't want, I think that this is a nuanced conversation. And I think that I don't want to just hold the line and say that the U.S. government doesn't want them here, because I don't know that that's true. And the reason why I don't know that that's true is because everyone is not being expelled and sent back. Right. So I think that U.S. immigration policy is weird and goofy in and of itself. Here's why. You go through a process to become a U.S. citizen. The test that you have to take to become a U.S. citizen to establish that, that you're worthy of being here, quote unquote, the questions on the test are like, who is the 16th president? What is, like
shit that doesn't matter.
Exactly. like that stuff that has no bearing, is no metric for your value system, for your character, for any of those things. Not that should even matter either. This is land, and so the idea that our immigration system is somehow not broken is silly. Our immigration system is completely broken. If we have to have one, right, it should be on the basis of humanity. How are we being humane to people seeking amnesty, to people, fleeing their own version of oppression, right? Like every country has their own version of oppression, but I think that we haven't had a president or political leadership brave enough to confront the realities of American history.
I want to go back just for a second to the thing that you brought up in the beginning of the image of the Haitian migrant being hunted. I don't think there's any other word that's more appropriate than that, by the guy on horseback. And I think what's crazy about that image is, except for its high definition, this is an image that could have existed 200 years ago in the country.
Right.
And, the image of, a black body being brutalized by, a resourced white man.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact, I think the fact that it existed at all, and the fact that this was surprising, and in fact, it was the White House spokesperson, Jen Psaki, that said, this is not who we are. This is not who the Biden and Harris administration is. And I thought it was interesting, too, that she said the Biden and Harris administration, because if I'm reading that, she's always said like the Biden administration. I think she was also saying, hey, don't forget that there's a black person here, too. So let's understand that, this is not us. This is just whatever. Right. But the fact that there are riders on these hunters on horseback shows that it is exactly. This is federal money that's going to this. It's expressly to do these sorts of things.
So all right. So the Border Patrol agent, the lieutenant in charge, of that day, he was talking about, he saw the pictures and it was astonishing to him. And, there's a full investigation and they're going to get to the bottom of it. Right. And so I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you something. Was that picture of that cowboy, Border Patrol agent on a horse whipping a Haitian migrant, was that somehow a misrepresentation of what actually happened? And he
Good
said,
question.
and he said, so the whole thing is under investigation. I said, well, and he said that practice has been suspended. I said, what practice has been suspended? He said, well, the whole horses, in the field, that's been suspended pending an investigation. I was like, what about the whipping part? He was like, well, yeah, that the entire practice has been suspended. So the idea that you suspended a practice, right? So what you saw in that picture is actually okay. That's first, that tells you that it's okay.
Right.
And two, it tells you that it's only suspended. It's not deemed inhumane, ridiculous, a call to slavery times, but that it's just suspended probably until, people are not talking about this issue anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Which, and even like, I hate saying like, in today's world or whatever, but in the tail end of an empire, right? In the final act of an empire, because let's be honest, I mean, there's no way we're gonna have like a Senate in like 40 years. There's just like no way. And good riddance, in my opinion. Frankly, the Supreme Court can go too while we're at it. But because there's crisis after crisis, because the system is completely metastasized and dying, it's likely that the conversation will change, because next week there's going to be some other bullshit that comes and distracts us from this. I mean, in a way, it's useful to know that, like, hey, maybe these problems aren't acute. Maybe these problems speak to kind of like a larger ill that we need to work away from. Of course, in my humble opinion, that larger ill would be like, imperial capitalism and a settler state. But so hopefully it can be useful in that regard. But again, the fucking irony to me that like that image could have existed 200 years ago, and in 2021 we're seeing the same thing. It's like we saw it and it was like, is this somebody's like, is this is like a dream, like a nightmare that somebody has and like wakes up from, and it's actually happening to desperate people, again, coming from a country that has been brutalized, whose president was likely assassinated by CIA trained people,
right?
Not that long ago, like within the last month. It's almost a bit too on the nose. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, and I want to ask this too. You asked them if anybody was administering COVID tests. Was there any talk about COVID vaccinations?
Oh no, absolutely. So that question was asked, but if they're not administering COVID tests, they're not getting vaccine. So, no.
I mean, Bill Gates and like the government basically pushed to have the vaccines patented so that the corporations that have concocted them can't be created by other countries, for instance, and that it has to have that like bottleneck, and them is that rate limiting step. And yet the fact that we have this abundance of vaccine availability, especially in a state where frankly not too many people are taking them, like it's insane to me that like at least as a stopgap for further propagation of the disease, that they would just offer the vaccinations. And yet that would be offering aid, and of course that would be foolish, Dwight, that you would that you would suggest that that's something that they would do and that would be valuable.
Yeah, no, I think that there was a real opportunity, though. There's a real opportunity there for public-private partnerships to be created, for hedge funds to impact invest. So like if you cannot get away from your capitalist, genetic makeup, there's even a way to make money there. Like, it's really like, a public-private partnership with an NGO, a local state government or the federal government, hedge fund, a bond issue. And you're vaccinating folks and you're inoculating folks and you're finding homes. So there's a real opportunity. The other thing is on the way there, because it's a 3-hour drive from San Antonio to Del Rio, and so we had a long drive, and so 2.5 hours. And so while we're driving, at one point for about an hour, we're driving, and this is America, and it's just vacant, wide open land for hundreds and thousands of acres, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, my nephew was sleeping at the time. I woke him up and I said, yo, I just need you to look at this, right? And what we're about to do when we get to the border is we're going to see 3,000 people. And they're going to say that the reason why they can't get in is because of overcrowding. But each one of those people could occupy 10 acres of their own, and it wouldn't crack a dent in how much vacant land is in just this part of a city, not let alone the rest of America.
It's so clearly, and again, as you were saying, like, even cynically, like a public-private partnership could even make money doing it, but that's not even what it's about. It's almost like,
Right.
It's in like fascism and stuff like that. Like the cruelty is the point. Is that
Right.
like, yeah, of course, 3,000 people in a country of 340 million. It doesn't even register.
Right.
It's not. It's like less than a rounding error.
Right.
It like so clearly doesn't even matter. I mean, and that could be said for nearly everything. I mean, today, people that saw me on Twitter today will recall this, but like I probably, as a mid to elder millennial, aside from 9/11, like the most defining event of my life was the 2008 financial crisis, and I think about it more often than I care to admit. And I kept rewatching this interview with then Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, where he was talking on 60 Minutes with, I think, Scott Pelley. And Scott Pelley was like, well, how do you actually like print the money, or how do you actually give the money to the big banks? Like, this was the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Are you giving them tax money? He said, no, we're literally going into their account and just changing the number. It's as simple as that. And so what I read that as is like, that's a choice. Right, that's a political choice. That what do we as a society, like, what do we want to do? I mean, in the case of TARP and the 2008 financial crisis, it was giving $800 billion to banks, to the largest banks in the country, that then used that money subsequently over the next few years to consolidate and become like all the more insanely powerful. But the fact that, like what you're saying, like the resources exist to give these people dignity. And frankly, it would be pretty fucking easy. It would be easy to give these people a home and resources and a $2,000 per person per month check, just put into their bank account. It would be relatively easy to do so, even if it was just temporary, like for 5 years, just to get you on your feet, and that's just guaranteed, and you can have it.
And that's the thing. If you know anything about, especially Caribbean people, is that they come here, they start businesses, they get to work. And not that should even be a justification, like, oh, they deserve, but like they come here and they actually they create thriving communities. Immigrant populations in general come here and create thriving communities for themselves. They add to the economy. They build up their own ecosystems. And so, it's just, there is no reason or rationale for the way that they're being treated. And I'm not saying that to say that even if they, even if as a group of people, there was some other line on them, that this would be okay.
Yeah, even under like the cynicism of capitalism, to say like, hey, let's put more meat in the grinder to exploit or whatever. Like, even for that, it's like, no, we don't even want to do that, because then that would somehow be, I think for like American hegemony, it would be admitting fault in a way, because it would be using our resources to right some sort of wrong.
Right.
Which can never be confronted, because then that would necessitate like an existential reckoning of American imperialism.
Well, a revisioning, redefining, and probably a restructuring of what America even is. I think because it's the slippery slope. Once you start going down that road of restorative justice, you've got to go all the way back to indigenous folks and say, you know what? I know we call this Brooklyn, but this is actually Lenape land. And because
Yep.
this is Lenape land, like we actually don't have the right to tax you. You should be taxing us.
Yes.
Like if you're just gonna go there, right? And so that's what America is afraid of. America is afraid of having to go there. And when I say America, I don't mean white America. I certainly include Black America in that, because we all achieve a certain degree of privilege by being here at the expense of neighboring countries, neighboring economies, foreign economies that we exploit and trade deals.
Yes.
Or with our political might, or with our drones, or with our nuclear weapon, right? So we all exact a certain amount of privilege. So if America was truly to embrace a reckoning, we'd all have to come out of our comfort zone, right? As a practical matter, and say, okay,
Yes.
you know what? I gotta, the home that I think I own, actually belongs to someone else. What's practical and what's equitable after all these years is probably something else.
Yep. Because if we start here, then we're gonna have to let in Afghan immigrants.
Afghan immigrants, they're in.
Oh God. It would be so easy.
Mm-hmm.
The infrastructure is set up to do this.
Right.
If the infrastructure is set up to do this.
Right.
Oh my God. And let me ask you a question. What you went through, in my opinion, would be fucking devastating. How did you stomach it? Are you sleeping at night? Are you okay? What lasting impact does it put on you?
So, it just reinforces, my concerns that, we know that America has never been what America says it is.
Right.
But it reinforces my concern that America is becoming very brazen. At least before, there was an attempt to conceal, to, fake it, but at this point, America is becoming, a fascist state where we're saying, this is just what it is. This is America. And if you want to be here, this is what you got to deal with. And that was very concerning for me. But I'm sleeping, I guess, as well as anybody can sleep in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of a political climate that we see is quickly shifting in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And again, under the administration or the good guys that's supposed to give us our best shot at remediating those problems, and yet here we are, discussing some of the worst ills that the country has to offer under the good guys. That's the part that just really gets me.
It's crazy. It's crazy. A leader could have simply gone down to the border, and said, "Oh, you know what?
Yes.
Let's build." You know how when we had European migrants coming and we built Governor's Island or put them on Ellis, on an island, and so that they could acclimate. Why don't we do that here? We own all of this vacant land. We can build a space. We can build a housing. We can build houses. We can build buildings, apartments, condos. Let's build a space, and let's create a thriving community and an ecosystem. Let's do that. And that would not have been a heavy lift.
No, it wouldn't have. Did you get the sense as well of how many more were coming? If this isn't acute, right? It's systemic. So was this just a particularly heavy?
It's years
time?
In the making. It's years in the making. So folks are coming for years, and for months, and just kind of being held up in different places because you need resources. This is years in the making. This is not, like, to your point, this is not an acute kind of happening where folks just one day got up and said, "Oh, we want to go." This is something that's been happening over the past few years. And the buildup, of course, was this political climate in Haiti, which is a minefield. And so folks are not safe, and so,
right.
They just had a coup, right? So there's no way of telling when, more people will come, but more people will come. They're coming in waves because while people are struggling for food, clothing, and shelter in some of these places that America exploits, Americans on TikTok, you know, boasting about PPP loans and,
Yes.
whatever else that makes sense.
I guess the only thing that I think about, that is going to exacerbate this sort of a thing, and maybe this is a harbinger for this, is, as the effects of climate change are, taking hold. And, our children are going to grow up entirely in an age of, very bad storms and very bad droughts and very bad, heat waves and very bad cold snaps and all this stuff. More climate refugees are going to exist. And America controls, one of the largest continental biomes, some of which are well adapted to handle this. And therefore, as you're saying, okay, maybe not in Texas, but there are large swaths of land where a lot of people could exist. But I think this isn't really a question. It's just, I'm just crying and dying on the inside just thinking about this, is that we just know that, if our current system of political economy and our current system of governance continues to exist, while these climate issues are continuing to exacerbate, not only we're going to see more of these, migrant communities of migrants trying to come into the country to live, but I think the cruelty is going to increase as well. And that's what really scares me a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, so this, for me, the solutions are, making sure that we're reinforcing our kids to be incredibly human, to have compassion and empathy. Don't become hardened by these cruelties, and also don't pick up these behaviors, because that's what happens. That's what I saw when I see. That's what I see when I see Kamala Harris, and some of her political motivations. These other leaders, other specifically leaders of color, going out and promoting policies that are oppressive. They're replicating behaviors of oppressive. And so I believe that it's really important for us, just as thinking about solutions to what's happening in our world, is to make sure that we reinforce to our children, do not take on the behaviors of oppressors.
Those Border Patrol agents have parents and they have, communities that they grew up in. And I guess it reinforces that, we need to stop making people that are okay with that.
Right.
Jesus.
Right.
Listen, Keith, I'm super glad that you were able to come on the program and share this experience with us. I'm sure, as is the case with me, and I'm sure the case of a lot of listeners, that this is the first person that we've had that has first-person experience down there seeing this, incredible failure of compassion and incredible triumph of a fascistic system. It's really sick, and so I'm really appreciative that you were able to come on and share with us these stories.
Hey, Dwight, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
For those that may not be familiar with your work or with the Combine's work, where can they find that?
You can go to BKLYN Combine, COMBINE. So BKLYN COMBINE.com or KeithWhitelaw.com. So KeithWhitelaw.com.
Keith, thank you again, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All righty.
Thanks for having me.
All righty.
Thanks for having me.